Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Travel, something many of us like to get our wanderlust and stretch out and find out what's going on around the world and our experiences in it. This might also become very important as we approach the age of 50 and beyond. We'll discover how travel can possibly transform us. Why might travel be more significant to us as we grow older? And what do the concepts of experience, adaptability, perspective, contemplation, time, relationships, and adventures share with travel? Our guest joining us today is going to share views on travel as a means for older adults to consider how aging is a spiritual journey, helping us to arrive at a place of deeper understanding and greater wisdom about ourselves and the world in which we live. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is Anthony Anteville. We're going to be talking about the 7 transformational gifts of travel, why they have more impact after the age of 50. Anthony, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Hey, Daniel. Thank you for having me.
Now, tell us, what do you consider to be the 7 transformational gifts of travel?
Okay, well, like you had mentioned before, I really see it as being experience, adaptability, perspective, contemplation, time, relationship, and adventure.
Did you want to go ahead and elaborate on that, or?
Well, if you want to ask me like a specific question, I mean, let's take experience for example.
Okay.
So one of the things that I see is that people, as they are older in life, process experience differently compared to younger adults. I've worked professionally with older adults for the last 25 years of my life. And having started that venture when I was in my mid-20s, gave me a bit of a perspective. You know, as a younger person, I looked at experience as being something that, you know, I was trying to really accumulate, you know, sort of running around and trying to pick up all these different bits of experience here and there. Sort of if you think of like the buffet dinner table. And it's like, well, I don't know what's down the line there because I've never gone through this before because I'm a young adult. And so I start loading up my plate, right? I'm making sure that I'm getting, you know, everything as I go down there because I just don't know, you know, what's going to be further down. And yet I don't want to miss out on anything. So I start piling up my plate. By the time I get to the end of the table, I start to realize, wow, you know, I've got a little bit more here than I really had anticipated. And when I get down to sort of, you know, enjoying the meal, I start to realize, hey, a lot of these things that I picked up, not really, you know, my dish, not really what I want. I think as we get older, we've gone through that buffet line several times. And so because of that, we're less distracted by the things that are sort of superficial and chasing after the shiny and trying to accumulate a whole bunch of things. And we start to really go to much more of what is unique and rare and vital to us. And I think that that's something that we find in the process of travel, that we find that a lot of younger people, I know that when I was younger and I went out and traveled to different places in Europe and around the world, I was really going through it all for the first time. And yet I was still processing things as a younger person who didn't have the awareness of myself that I did now that I'm in my later years, and that I didn't really have the same understanding of the world because I just hadn't interacted with it for as many years as I have now.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, too, because a lot of times when people think about travel, they're thinking about, you know, places to go see, visit, say, things like that, and it doesn't really seem to get out of the ordinary of something you might be able to do at home. You know, and I was kind of curious that, you know, how is it that people process the experience of travel compared, you know, at over the age of 50 compared to people who are younger?
Well, I think I was recently reading an AARP research paper about travel, and they had really surveyed vast number of people, younger and older, to get their perspectives on travel. One of the things that they really found were that the younger people were very interested in being involved in social media while they were traveling. Older people, not really so much. It was actually a real minority of people that were 50 and older, that were interested in engaging with, Facebook and things like this to like post what they were doing. They actually were more interested in being in the experience, actually being in the here and now of what they were doing. The same thing I think we see in terms of all the excitement that happens when people want to sort of do the bungee jumping and they want to, go off and do all the hang gliding, and there's all this activity that they're really wanting to do maybe when they're younger. And yet in that same AARP report, they were saying that actually older people are more interested in being able to take in more of the ephemeral beauty of something. They're more interested on the stroll on the beach, really being able to take in that specific, sunrise that was unique to the place that they were in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. It's funny how you'll see this day and age, even the younger generation with their cell phones, and, you go to a concert or wherever it is, you can be going to a place like Multnomah Falls, which is located in Portland, Oregon, and they're so busy behind their cell phone taking pictures, they're not really, as you would say, part of that experience or integrated into it. So it seems like they're really kind of missing the boat a little bit, doesn't it?
Exactly. There's so many times that I've been to different places. I remember a trip to New Zealand I took last year. And my wife and I were at this beautiful waterfall that was there. Tour bus drove up, and all these young people just sort of disembarked from this thing. They all sort of rushed out to there, just grabbed their phones, taking photos, and then they were back on the bus. Like that was, they'll process the experience later by looking at a photograph on their phone, instead of actually just standing there and just like, let me breathe in the mists of this waterfall. Let me hear what the unique sound is to this waterfall, because I would imagine as you've traveled around the world, you know that every place has a different sound, has a different sense of presence. And if we're so distracted by the idea that we need to be doing something instead of being inspired by that place, by the different energies that are around and that are particular to that place, we miss a lot.
There's no doubt about that. I'm kind of curious, too, that, what would you say, because you seem to work with this age group quite a bit, changes for us as adults over the age of 50 that make travel more meaningful?
Well, firstly, as we're getting older, we're changing. And I know that a lot of people are trying to say, 60 is the new 40 and 40 is the new 20, but I think we're kidding ourselves here a bit. There's some great medical technologies that are out there, and definitely people are taking care of themselves better. We know more about like exercise and nutrition and these types of things. But inevitably, the hip starts to flare up. You get that little bit of sciatica. You might be having maybe a tooth that's going to have that root canal or get pulled. There's these things that happen to us as we get older. And with that understanding that we are mortal, life is this ephemeral process for us as we move through it, that it's really important to be able to experience it in more of a genuine way and not in the way of societal expectations or cultural expectations that were maybe on us. When we were younger, of course, we were expected to sort of settle on certain things. We were expected to figure out what type of course of education we were going to take, what school we were going to go to, what type of studies we were going to pursue, what our career was going to look like, start a family. All these things that we start to, I have to do this and I have to do this. And yet a lot of that sort of a checklist that really is sort of a societal or cultural expectation that can be put upon us. And yet, as time goes on and we start to meet those various expectations, get the amount of education that we're probably going to have pretty much in our life, we end up, working in that career, and we start getting to the point where we're seeing retirement on the horizon, raise the family, or getting pretty close to the empty nest kind of thing. We start to look at ourselves and go, hey, what's left here? Me. I'm here. What do I need for me now that I've gone through all of these other stages and have really accomplished them And now it's time to sort of get more out of less. Start to filter that process. Start to take those different experiences and distill them.
You know, and it's so true, too, when it comes to travel. I remember when I was younger, when I traveled, I really enjoyed being in the experience. And I had served in the United States military and the Navy, so we did a lot of traveling.
Yes.
And it seemed each time we hit a port, most people were just interested in hitting the bars and finding out if they can get chicks. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, you can do that in the United States. You know, big deal. You know, I don't know when I'm going to be back here again. So I'd really submerge myself into the culture and really get out there and walk around. I was pretty much a loner in that respect. And, you know, so you get back on the boat, it seemed to me all the experiences were basically the same thing, you know, and it's like, well, you know, this is what I experienced going on out there. Whoa, really, you did that? And I was, yeah, it was a good time kind of a thing.
Right.
And you know, as I was mentioning earlier, it seems that you were talking about how it can contribute travel to our spiritual transformation. Describe why that is.
Well, again, because we have a better sense of, I feel, who we are, and we've been able to deal with some of the more superfluous and superficial aspects of the things that we were all sort of caught up with in more of our youth. We're more focused, you know, then probably on our appearance. I know there's still this very youthful push in our society. So unfortunately, you know, there are some older people that are still get caught in that sort of loop that we dealt with probably more in our teens and our 20s of our physical appearance. But deep down, I feel people start to really get a sense of the appearance of the spirit within and the sense of who they are. And I think as we work with a better understanding of who we are, we're then able to interact with our world in a way that removes a lot of filters, removes a lot of confusion, instead of sort of spinning around on sort of these lower planes of understanding and existence. We can start to experience how it is to be able to commune with something like a tree or a waterfall or a mountain without a feeling that we need to impose some aspect of ourself, that we need to take some important part of our personality and impress it into that scene. Instead, what we can do is we can withdraw the personality a bit, let it fall a little bit further back, and really be more of spiritual being with a spiritual moment or a spiritual place or another being of existence, be it, you know, an animal, a tree, another person from another culture.
No doubt about that, how much growing you can do when you actually want to relate, you know, with the areas and the people that you're actually going to. Now, it's interesting when you think about the concept of perspective to a personal travel experience. How would you be able to relate that to an experience when it comes to perspective? Does that have to do a lot with, I guess, experience? Or what do you think?
Well, you know, perspective's a very interesting term, and it took some time to really come to that one. I was originally formally trained as a visual artist, and so when I consider perspective, I often think of it in artistic terms of form. And if we imagine ourselves in a landscape with only in front of us a triangle as an upward shape, so it's got its base on the horizon and its apex is reaching up into the sky. And yet we realize that we're looking at not just a shape, but actually a three-dimensional form. So this could be a pyramid, let's say. But because we're just looking right at the center of it, and we can't look around it, is it a pyramid with a three-sided base? Is it a triangular base? Or is it a square base? Does it actually have four sides to this pyramid? We don't know until we start to put ourselves into motion. We have to move around it. And as we move around it, then we're able to get more information, greater insights as to what it is that we are observing. And I think that's a big part of what really comes down to the spiritual transformation when it comes to travel. We have certain understandings of the world about us, and yet when we go to a different place, especially a place with a different culture, different norms, it can really sort of shake things up a bit, and yet I'm still looking at, let's say, a house. I'm familiar with the concept of house and dwelling. And yet when I go into another house, let's say in the Southern Hemisphere, it's a very different kind of feeling. Firstly, they relate their homes in a different way because the sun has a different relationship to the Earth, or the Earth actually has a different relationship to the sun. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, we're used to, if we want to track the sun across the sky, we're used to seeing from east to west, the sun goes, but we have to face southwardly to watch the sun arc across the sky. In the Southern Hemisphere, you would actually have to turn and face to the north because that's where the equator is located for them. And so when you start to realize that, it really shifts things because it's like, okay, well, so they had to set up their house so the sun would be able to stream in through northern windows where everybody here in the north, we want to have a southern exposure, right? And we can stay nice and warm and enjoy the sun. It's the opposite for them. And then when we start to realize, wow, not only does the house need to be reoriented, but my thinking has to be, because now I realize not only am I looking at the sun in a different direction, but instead of looking at one part of the sun that I've been used to, I'm actually looking at the opposite pole of the sun. Same thing happened with when I started to really understand the movement and the shape of the moon, that actually a waxing and waning moon in the Southern Hemisphere is opposite of what it is in the Northern Hemisphere. So I was like, wait a second, I thought we were having a waxing moon. Oh no, it's, even though it looks like a waning moon as I would see in the Northern Hemisphere, it is still waxing.
Right.
It's very confusing at first. So perspective really comes into play when we start to move ourselves around the globe, and we're able to then gain greater insights as to what actually is happening in our world.
Right. You know, contemplation is also important during the travel experience. So what would you say is the best way to define contemplation, and how does it tie in with travel?
Well, contemplation, I see as, the definition of it is, continually setting our attention on something and doing that with intention. So we're not talking about daydreaming. A lot of people might consider contemplation as well. I just sort of like just let my mind sort of float on this sort of topic. And it can, but as long as we need to keep a certain level of intention and focus to what it is that we're contemplating, as well as realizing we also aren't going to go into a place of analysis. Just because I'm contemplating something doesn't mean that I'm like sitting here and I'm like breaking it apart piece by piece in this real reductivistic kind of approach that we have these days. The word itself comes from a Latin word, and the root of that word means temple. And what happened back in the Greek and Roman era was there were the priests that would do augury, and part of contemplation and temple was that they would contemplate a specific piece of either land or a specific piece of the sky, let's say for the sky, for the way the birds would fly through it, what type of birds would fly through, what were their movement, what were their shapes, how were their legs forming different shapes as they would fly by, or their wings forming different shapes. These were the things that the priests would be focusing on in those ancient times in their practice of contemplation. So there was actually an interchange and exchange that's happening between the natural world and the human world. And I think with contemplation and with travel, we're able to work with that concept of place and the idea of gently resting our awareness in a new location to discover new insights, have new things revealed within ourselves, as well as the inspiration of the natural world to show us things that we had never before realized.
Mm-hmm. It's just also fascinating when you think of travel from this experience, how much you're really wanting to absorb. And, you kind of think why it's important for people who, at the age of 50 and beyond, why it's important for them to seek travel, and ways that might even transform, for instance, our relationships with other people.
Yes. Yes. Meeting other people is an amazing experience, especially as Americans. There are so many people that emigrated over the centuries to come to North America, the United States. And one of the things that my wife and I experienced when we went to Scotland, we were on the Isle of Mull, was this real sense of being welcomed by people as if we were like lost cousins. They find out you're from the United States, and they go, "Oh, really? Tell me more. We were driving through Mull, realized that there was really no other place to eat. We sort of left the main port when we had driven off the ferry, and so we were driving and driving. And we come into this little village of Pennygale, and there's a little sign up in front of a person's home saying that they offer soup and sandwiches. And so sort of stopped there, and seeing there's a lot of people in what appears to be the living room that has been made up into sort of a dining room. And I knock on the door, and I don't get any response, so I sort of venture in further to see if there's enough room. And this wonderful woman by the name of Carol welcomed me and my wife into her kitchen. "Oh no, I don't have enough room in the dining area. Oh, just come and sit at my kitchen table, and I'll make you soup and sandwiches." And it was just this wonderful experience that I just don't feel that most Americans would have the comfort, even if they're doing sort of the little pop-up restaurant, to just sort of welcome people into their kitchen in such a way. And it had this fantastic feeling of being welcomed home. I mean, her husband, and a lot of people sort of then filtered out because we'd come in later on, so we were sort of the last ones there for lunch. And next thing I know, her husband comes in. He's a big guy. Looks like somebody who spent most of his life, working on trucks and all. And he comes out, and he comes in, and he's like, "Oh, see, he's talking to his wife, and then he brings it over to us. "Oh, see what I found." A little duckling in his hand. And he's sitting here giving these little kisses to this duck. He says, "Oh, yes, the mother unfortunately got hit by a car, last week, and we're having to, find, but the one duckling sort of got away." And I was just feeling like I'm seeing this amazing sort of just regular exchange that happens every day in their home while I sit at their kitchen table having a meal. It's great.
It's funny you should bring that up. I remember having an experience in South America. We were I'm trying to remember where it was. It was just north of Rio de Janeiro. And it was a friend of mine and I, we went out into town, and so we had left a nightclub that we were at and kind of wandered down. It was a fairly narrow alley. And the next thing I know, I see a couple of tables outside of a doorway and a couple of chairs that you could sit at. And basically, like you were talking about this house here that somebody seemed to renovate into a mock restaurant, if you will.
Yeah, right.
They do the very same thing, and they were serving right out of their kitchen, so you can get, big quarts of beer and whatever the case is. So we decided to go ahead and have a beer and sit down. It was real quiet. It was probably around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Mm. So all at once, from around the corner, this big garbage truck comes barreling down the alleyway, and we realize, there's not a whole lot of room for this guy to really get around us. So, and they didn't seem interested in stopping either, as though they didn't even notice we were sitting there right in front of them as though the truck was hurling toward us. And the next thing you know, I'm like, I don't know about you, but I'm getting the hell out of here. And so I got up, and we both, kind of got out of the way. And sure enough, this truck just plowed our table over. Oh, my chairs the whole bit. The next thing you know, he goes flying by, and they went to turn the corner. There's this guy hanging on the back of the truck for dear life, and I thought, this is one heck of a travel experience. But This was back in the 1980s, so we didn't have time for a cell phone, to be able to take a picture of something like that.
Right.
But, those are the kinds of things that I think you really talk about when you talk about helping people after the age of 50, seek adventure. It's not like living dangerously, but it's just like living, kind of getting out of the routine of what it is that you do day to day. And I remember some years ago I was talking with a guest, and he was talking about how he had sold everything and took his family on a world tour, if you will.
Beautiful.
And, it was really interesting, the stories that he was sharing and hearing the experiences. And this was probably the early part of the 1990s when he did this, so technology wasn't anything like it is today. I'm sure the experience would have been a lot different, too. But he described how they were going to places like the Sistine Chapel, and you were seeing the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and just all these places that as adults they were excited about going to. But they said the kids really lit up when they went to Africa and began to see the animals. And so you think about things like that, and I'm kind of curious, how do you help people arrange the travel or the trips that they want to take? What do you kind of take into consideration there?
Well, when we're designing a set trip, something, and we accompany and attend all of the trips that we put together, and we do these as very very small groups, 10 people is what we limit our trips to. And my wife Ann and I serve as tour leaders. We go through a process of not making sure that, firstly, it's not going to be an on the bus, off the bus kind of tour. Secondly, we're going to make sure that it is not something like the cruise ship, bring your artificial American culture and environment with you wherever you go. So, firstly, it's going to be for a particular kind of person who really wants to take that deep dive into the culture of wherever it is that they're going. We also make a point to contact all of the accommodations ourselves directly and not working through any sort of middleman sort of preset packaged tours, because it's not going to give us the ability to customize the tour the way we want to. We're really looking to make sure that tours are going to have a level of accessibility because, hey, as we get older, some of us may have some mobility issues. There might be some people who are really apt and able at 50, 60, 70 to be, just take it off and they can just hike all day. And it doesn't matter what the terrain is. They're experienced and accomplished, and they have the stamina and the energy to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. There are other people that will be like, wow, just walking through a level archaeological site where there are pathways and doing that for 2 hours, that'll be about my max that they might consider to be right for them. So we work to design various levels of tours depending upon where it is that we're going. So when we're putting together something, let's say for like a New Zealand tour, that is just because of the remoteness of it. Plus, it's going to be a very extensive, we're talking 13 hours plus of air travel. People need to be at a certain level. So they have to have their traveling chops, if you will, up to be able to take that. So we're going to put together something that's going to be a little bit more of a rigorous one already because just the traveling there is going to require it. But if we do something, let's say, to the UK, we shift it. We have two tours actually that are coming up for the UK for this fall. One is going to be to Scotland, going to be a little bit more walking around than we would have for the trip that is going to be in southern England. So we have different levels of activity, and we let people know that, and then we design the tours accordingly. So we don't want to go and put something that's going to be a lot of low activity and then throw one big high activity thing into it because that'll make the tour unbalanced. So the one for southern England is going to be a little bit at a more leisurely pace, not necessarily going to so many different locations to stay. It'll be more like, we'll have one certain sort of main sort of place that's sort of our HQ, if you will, or headquarters, and then we'll sort of branch out from there on daily excursions to different locations. So we might have like 2 or 3 places within an 11-day, 12-day tour compared to the trip to Scotland, where we will be spending 2 nights at various locations and then just keep traveling around. I believe we're going from, we're going to be Isle of Arran, Isle of Mull, we're going to be in the Highlands. And so really being able to sort of take in these different experiences and yet needing to be at a little bit more of a higher level of mobility, not so bothered by, hey, every 2 days or 3 days I'm having to pack my suitcase back up and I'm going back to the bus to be able to get to another place for us to then offload and be there for 2 or 3 days.
Oh, sounds nice. I'm curious, where can people learn more about what you do and how they can get involved?
Well, they can go to our website, championadventuresglobal.com, and that is the best place for them to start their inquiry as to what it is that we do, the trips that we have up and available and that we're working on, and of course to learn more about us. What we really want to be able to do is focus on preparing people well for trips. A lot of the times we'll find that people haven't had a good trip on their own or from some other experience because they weren't prepared adequately. What we do is we put together a meeting in advance before going off on the trip. People can ask their questions. We give them information, both cultural, that will be worthwhile for them, as well as we're letting them know what the pace is going to be like on that trip. And they get a chance to know us. They get a chance to know each other. And again, these are small groups. We're talking 10 or less, and it gets them prepared for it. And then we're able to be there along the way. Something comes up. They have sort of us as sort of a concierge kind of style service to be able to, let us know something's not working and they need a little bit of help with something else, as well as for us to just be paying attention as to, looks like maybe we should pull back a little bit. People are starting to get a little tired, or, hey, let's put the accelerator down and move a little bit more and get a little bit more happening here. So again, Champion Adventures Global is probably the best place for people to find information, so championadventuresglobal.com, and we refer to ourselves as Champion Adventures.
Well, very good, Anthony. It's been a pleasure to have you here on a program and kind of look at travel in a more reflective, engaging process rather than just something you want to scratch off of a bucket list.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what we're thinking.
Go ahead and give out that website one more time.
Okay, so it's championadventuresglobal.com.
Sounds like a lot of fun, Anthony. Thank you for being on the program with us today.
Hey, it's been a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there who have the wanderlust. Maybe you might wander over to our website where you can discover more by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter and keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50 as well as upcoming programs. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.